I'm excited to introduce our special guest. Bethany Kehdy is a Lebanese-American culinary expert and cookbook author specializing in the cuisines of the Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa. Bethany, I have been a big fan of your work for a long time. I'm really excited for you to be on the series. Welcome to Africa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. So I love everything you guys do. And I was introduced to Africa actually by Farah, which I'm sure everybody will mostly know or be familiar with. So yeah, so it's a great honor to be a part of this today.
So I want to start kind of at the beginning of your life a little bit. And I was interested, you grew up in Lebanon, and a lot of your work features Lebanon very prominently. As I was learning about you, I realized that you are very much like I am, a child of the Civil War. And in your sort of part of your childhood, there was this moment where you left Ashrafiyya and you went and you moved into Baskinta, into the Daya, the village. So I'm curious how that changed your relationship to food and your relationship to land as a kid.
Yeah. So for me, till this day, even though I grew up a lot and I'm a city girl, but for me, home, my root is Baskinta. There's no doubt about it. When I get there, it's just, it's this feeling, this really big sinking feeling that you get. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that when we grew up, we were sort of, plunked there. I mean, most summers, but really for 4 years during the late 80s, we were there, just kind of living off. Living off the land. So my dad is a lawyer, but he set up a dairy farm, and then that's what he did for a couple of years. So it was quite interesting in the sense that a lot of our family came up as well. They were moving away from all the shelling that was happening in the city and the outskirts, and so we were up there, and there was jam making and harvesting and slaughterings and things like that. So it was very rooting.
Did you go through this city mouse, country mouse transformation that I'm imagining in my mind?
Yes. Yeah, there is a lot of that. And there's a lot of sort of, I think there's a lot more appreciation for the village these days in Lebanon.
Yeah.
But when we were growing up, there was this sort of like, it was looked down upon, like, oh, there's the cat. This is Miss Millie. So there, there was a lot of that sort of kind of your identity is shunned a little bit if you have an appreciation or an association to your village and traditions. So let me just.
Villages before they were cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think villages are amazing. But Instagram helped make them really cool. So,
it's true.
Yeah.
Before we move on past Baskinta, so for those of you who don't know, these slides are not slides that Bethany created, right? And they're very much just visual aids. For those of you who can't see it, this is a sort of an idyllic scene of Baskinta. But, when you were describing your life, this dairy farm, is this what Baskinta looks like in your mind's eye, or does it look very different?
No, this is it. This is from that. Hey, the as you enter after Besançon, which is where I went. So I was French educated. That's the look. That's Mount Sanin, which are all part of Qadat Baskinta anyway. So Baskinta is massive. People don't realize how big it is. For me, it's one of the most beautiful villages. It's biased, but really a lot of people that have gone to several different villages and do this sort of village voyeurism, let's say, appreciate it. They appreciate it for its beauty and the hikes, and just it's very, there's lots going on. And yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk about your the kitchen you grew up in. right? Before the call, I was mentioning to you that every time I speak to a chef or somebody who is a sort of food practitioner, I'm always curious how they reflect on the kitchen that they grew up in, because everybody thinks their mom and their grandmother are the best cook ever, but you've quite literally met and worked with some of the best cooks in the world and chefs in the world. So I'm curious what relationship you have, like emotional relationship you have to the food you ate growing up, that you still will affirm, no, this is still the best food growing up.
Yeah. So most of, okay, I learned a lot of my cooking, obviously, just by watching my grandmother and my aunts. But if you were to ask me, like, in terms of a lot of the dishes I make now these days aren't necessarily in the most traditional way. I mean, the only things I'm cooking in the way I might have learned them is most often mjaddra. Or the mtab'a, or things, it's the tabkhat, it's the very atypical tabkhat. And I tend to think sometimes, even from a technique point, I'll be like, oh, why are they doing that? But when I eat it, it's comfort. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So I go back to it. You kind of look at it from a technique perspective. You're like, oh, I wouldn't do it that way, or I would layer in the ingredients this way or that way. But still, when my aunt makes some jadra, I'm like, oh my God, this is heaven. So, there's an association. It's memories, isn't it? Memories bring this, the familiarity of it and the comfort. So it could be a bit conflicting, right? There's a bit of conflict, but food is it's soul. It's about the soul that goes into it. So it's not necessarily always about the technique, which is something I drive on about anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk after childhood, you go to AUB, and I want to talk about this moment, this sort of 10-year span in your life before you fully launch into the food world. And I spoke to you about this right before the call briefly. There seems to be these like two formative moments in your post-childhood life. One, which is 2002, in order to pay for tuition at AUB, you decide, okay, screw it. I'm going to be a part of this beauty pageant, and you're quite successful. And then after that, you graduate from AUB and you kind of travel around the world doing a bunch of different things. That at the time, maybe you were frustrated with this thing, this moment, and you wanted to distance yourself. But now with the perspective of age and sort of distance, how do you reflect on that sort of 10-year span, both of those very sort of formative experiences?
So I think, when I look back at it, I think it's a real sign of my entrepreneurial spirit. We were in a point in our lives and I needed to pay for my own tuition. I actually ended up dropping out of AUB after year 2. And then I left to the US and I figured, you know what, I'm going to do it. I don't need a college education to, do business. And so I think, in hindsight, it was something that was developing in me. It was just kind of this sort of, this seed that I think, I had, or that drive, let's say. And I look back at it when I the way I went to, so my father was obviously against the idea when I proposed it to him, and he left the country for a month for some work. And you needed your passport and stuff. So I had all my kind of documents, and I went and I literally was at the beach and I heard it on the radio and I said, oh, this is okay, let me head there right now. And literally headed there. It
was one of those just like normal.
And I walk in and all the women, everyone's got their hair done and it's full makeup. And I'm just kind of like, what? Beach hair. This is the beach look. So it was quite, also another sign of sort of my spontaneous nature of doing
things. I woke up like this.
So, and then so it was, for me, it's something that was meant to be fun. I didn't really take it that seriously. It wasn't, and I don't say this in a dismissive way at all, because for some women, this is a very big part of, for me, it wasn't. It was just kind of a means to an end, what I really thought I could do now, and, Miss Lebanon is one of the best, highest paying pageants in the world. So, there's something to say for that. So, so I guess I look back at it and I think I got to go to Miss World, which was for me a very enriching experience. And I developed a lot of really interesting friendships. We still talk today. So, that was definitely.
Were you always a performer? Because you have this show, you have a show business aspect that is undeniable.
But I don't think so. See, I don't. So I think also for me, Miss Lebanon and Miss World sort of made a point for me that I am actually not cut out for this type of world. I'm not cut out for this sort of kind of put on the show. And, I like walking the catwalk, but it just kind of, that it ends there. And then TV for me has been something that was difficult, that I really needed to start working on and developing and improving, because I wanted to get my recipes out there. Yeah. So, it was that really sort of my wanting to share food and recipes and that knowledge that sort of, I think, broke my shell.
Yeah. So after that, you kind of are on the road for a while, right?
Yeah.
And I have on the screen, for those of you who can't see the screen because they're listening to the podcast, these two images of Lahina Grill and Oyster Bar, right?
Yeah.
In Maui.
Yeah.
Tell me the
memories.
Yeah, I thought these photos might bring back memories.
What's the story?
Yeah, what's the story here? Tell me the story.
So I was in Miami at the time, cooking up a storm because I couldn't deal with my day job, which was basically sales and mortgage. I was selling mortgages and houses, real estate. And it was the whole subprime. If anyone's familiar with the situation, there's this whole subprime scam that was going on, and it was really, you couldn't kind of avoid seeing it happen around you in the industry, and it really affected me on a personal level to see how crooked people could really be. So I was cooking a lot. I was cooking like crazy on Saturdays and Sundays, just kind of, it's always been my sort of form of therapy, right? And then we decided to go on holiday to Maui, because my mother is American and that whole side of the family is there. Her brothers had all moved there. My uncle had opened Lahaina Store Grill and Restaurant Bar. Now his wife is the current operator of Mama's Fish House, which is one of the best restaurants in the US, rated, year on year for a couple of decades now. She's been working with them for that long, and she did not want to have anything to do with it. They wanted to keep that separate. And he saw how passionate I was about cooking and all of that. So he offered me the opportunity to come on board and help him and shadow her in terms of what I needed to learn in terms of like restaurants. So this was my first restaurant gig. And I did it for a whole year. I moved there, obviously, which was quite interesting. My two siblings were already living there. And then, that was it. I was chained to the restaurant for an entire year, which became exhausting. And also it was far. It was far from Lebanon. I remember we took a trip. It took us at least 72 hours. We had to fly to, at the time, they didn't run direct flights. So you had to fly into Waikiki. From there, you would take a flight to LA, from LA to London. And it was just like, oh my gosh, by the time you arrive, it's time to go back. Yeah. So it's a good retirement place, but Maui's fascinating and beautiful. Yeah.
So in this time, you're saying that you're cooking like crazy, and there's this quote I read in an old article about you, where you talked about this like ever expanding Word document of recipes, right?
Yeah.
I wish I could have this like .doc file.
I know, right? It's somewhere. I need to, it's
It's
on
like in
a
some like
hard drive somewhere.
Word
Yeah.
perfect file.
Yes, right. Very dirty, very messy. So I used to, when I was in Miami, I would call my aunt, and I would get via Skype, and I would just be like, how are you making kibbeh? Can you tell me? And obviously you would get these sort of like directions with them. Anyone who's familiar with from the Middle East, that if they've like, you know, gone through this with their parents, you know, finjan qahweh, حطي وذوقي وشوفي. You know, there's no clear guidelines. So this sort of became my experiment. So I would write down and say, okay, I did this today, that worked, this was the amount I did. So and then it just developed. And then so this was over 3 to 4 years. And then I wasn't cooking that much in Maui, obviously, because I was stuck in a restaurant. I was eating a lot of clam chowder, though. So then but when I got to London, that is where I literally, within the first week, I was freezing and stuck to a stove. And then just decided, that's it. I don't know why I had discovered blogging. It was quite delayed, considering that I would later on go and start a blogging conference. But yes.
So this, perfect. I was saying to you that I feel like you have this knack at catching the wave, right? And for, I guess if anyone's listening to this who's under the age of 25, the word food blogger sort of hit the world like a tsunami. It's like one of those things that did not exist, and then everyone wanted to be a food blogger.
Yeah.
But you actually became one, and you started a website, Dirty Kitchen Secrets, that has your sort of patented sense of humor and featured tons of recipes. But part of your entrepreneurial spirit realized, oh, this is also a worldwide phenomena. I'm not the only one. I want to build a community. So tell people about Food Blogger Connect.
Right. So basically, when you start blogging back in the day, this was quite interesting. And people will, I don't know, you know, now we're in the influencer era, right? But in the blogging era, we had this thing where you were so obsessed with the content and the message that you were trying to get out, and this blog that you wanted to represent you, that you ended up just being, you're basically a nerd stuck at home, just kind of like hyper focused on this, which is why I ended up quitting my job. I quit my day job because I morally couldn't kind of, you know, do the two.
But you had like 60,000 monthly readers.
Yeah.
It was a huge publication.
It was definitely, you know, one of the more widely read blogs. And the thing with that is, by being stuck at home and wanting to actually really develop, you know, I wanted to take better pictures for my blog, and I wanted my blog to look like this, and I wanted my messaging to kind of my writing. How am I going to improve my writing so I can kind of get more readers and get more people interested in this message I'm trying to put out? That I decided I'm not going to fly to LA to that's the nearest sort of conference.
Yeah.
We're all on Twitter. Why don't I just see who's interested in meeting up so we can just kind of exchange what's working and what's not working? And it's really interesting because it was supposed to be just like an afternoon lunch in one of Tony Kitos's actual first restaurants. And it ended up being, we had people flying in from India. I mean, it just like spiraled within a couple of weeks. So we, you know, and then that was it. It was like, okay, we're going to do this every year. We're going to do it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And it evolved. So we ran it for 5 years, and it really turned into a sort of mecca for food blogging. So
if I look at the logo, right, there is Food Blogger Connect. Nothing Arab about that. There's a very like subtle sukoon.
Yes.
Over the right?
Yeah.
And even Dirty Kitchen Secrets.
Funny, yeah.
Right? There's nothing Arab about it, but there is, you know, if you just spend a little time thinking about it, for those who know will know, right?
Yeah.
People will notice these small little hints. However, you describe yourself like now, if you go to your website, this is your byline, right?
Yeah.
A champion of Middle Eastern food and recipes. When did that switch? When did you realize like, oh, I'm not dirty little, I'm dirty kitchen secrets, or I am like dirty Middle Eastern kitchen secrets person?
Yeah.
When did that switch?
So within the first year, the types of recipes, it just became very apparent that the types of recipes that I was sharing were obviously the recipes that I was cooking and eating, or that I really knew already how to cook more or less, or was getting guidance at how to cook them. And my curiosity also behind those dishes, that's where I would kind of like really just get kind of hyper curious as to why, or, you know, why do we all have empanadas? Like, why does that culture? So it was that stuff that was sort of driving me to write and cook these recipes. But I didn't change the name, you know, so now you notice Bethany Kehdy, which is down because we have an SSL issue, which we're working on right now. But so the reason, you know, I changed that name was because I felt, which I still love, I still own the website. I love it. People tried to buy it and I will not sell it because I just think it's such a great name. I mean, I was banned in several countries. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, you couldn't read it in several countries, because it was considered maybe potentially a pornographic site. So from that standpoint, I figured, you know what, I need to just kind of, you know, legitimize it a little bit more and call it Bethany Kehdy. How boring, but you know, it'll have to do because this is my work now.
Yeah.
So, but it's ever evolving, you know, it says a champion. So the website is also under, we're working on getting that updated as well, but it currently says that, but also my idea of what do we call our food and our cuisine, because I have to face that every day. You know, I get pigeonholed into Lebanese and I'm like, well, you know, I don't do Lebanese. What is Lebanese? You know, I talk about that a lot in my last book. And I wanted to sort of kind of focus on Western Asian food, but from a marketing standpoint, publishers don't like that because they're like, what is that? People know it as Middle Eastern food. We're just going to call it Middle Eastern or Levantine. Even still, that's sort of kind of a bit too niche, but they're sort of opening up to that idea a little bit more today. So, so even, you know, it's just, your work always evolves. I mean, I hope it should always do that anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so I have on the screen the covers of your two books, The Jeweled Kitchen and The Jeweled Table. I want to talk a little bit about your relationship to the pomegranate.
Yeah. You know, look, I love pomegranates and it seems like this sort of branding that's come out, because it's really funny. Somebody said it the other day. They're like, I just see you and I just see pomegranates. It's like pomegranates everywhere in your work. And I'm like, yeah. But that sort of came, it's not necessarily just me. I mean, even the title, The Jeweled Kitchen, was actually coined by one of somebody in the office at the publishing house, because they thought, oh my God, everything you do is just very jeweled, you know, the way you'd like to get dressed and the way your food and your table. And it's just all like very sort of jeweled. They're like, so let's just call it The Jeweled Kitchen. And I was like, okay, fine. So it's not something that kind of necessarily started with me on purpose, neither the association. I guess there's been a little bit more sort of work by the publishers and the marketing teams that have been involved.
Yeah.
But I do love pomegranates. So I don't feel misaligned.
Yeah.
And they're great part of the food, you know, they're great. They're definitely a big element of our cuisine.
Isn't it part of the logo of the blog and the conference too?
So that is a fig.
That's a fig.
That is a fig. Now, and my current logo is a I don't know how to share that with you because I can be technically challenged. So that is my current logo is a fig tree, because my name, which people don't realize, is actually it's Aramaic based. It's Beit Anya. So Bethany, house of, which could be house. So there are many interpretations to it, so it's quite debated still, whether it's House of Sorrow because of the Lazarus, and it was historically a place where they would take care of people who were ill and with ailments, or House of Fig because of the fig trees. So I've chosen obviously the more positive route, which is fig. And I absolutely, if you were to tell me what is your favorite fruit, I would tell you it's a fig. So, and that's big memories from eating figs in Baskinta as children too. So that is the fig. So you can kind of see it, and it's just kind of evolved from there, and how that has evolved, the figs into a fig tree. But the pomegranate is far more Middle Eastern. It's more iconic.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about, I'm going to just shuffle through some of these images mostly from your Instagram and some of them from the book and the website. So for example, like leftover Tabbouleh quiche, right? There is nothing in your original Word document that is related to this, right?
No.
So how, where's the inspiration process come from?
So so one of my favorite bakeries in Lebanon is Furun Sabaya in Amshit. And I adore the ursbed, which they make with preserved meat, awarma, or they just make it the vegetarian version, right? So I was asked, the inspiration for that in particular, they asked me, what is your favorite bakery? This was for an online magazine. I believe it was the Kitchen. I can't recall which one. But they had asked me, what is your favorite bakery in Lebanon? Will you do an inspired dish from that? And I thought, you know what? This is their ursbed. They put a bit of parsley, but what if we brought in the, leftover tabbouleh? Sometimes we have, you've got some in the fridge, because it does happen, but I don't like it the next day. Some people do like it. I love it fresh. So I plunk that into this, and there you go. So it's I don't know. It can be quite haphazard, but there are times where I will spend 2 to 3 days building a recipe and building a dish. So,
Do you feel like, I always think about cookbook authors and contrasting them with musicians who are putting together an album. And I can imagine that, a band gets told by a producer, you have to include this single, right? The audience will like this single. And you're like, but it's not really me. It's like, no, you've got to put this in there. Like 5 for you, 1 for them. Like you got to put this in there. And is there some level of pragmatism that you have to sort of endure while putting together a cookbook of like, I'd never eat this. This is a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass to cook. It's a pain in the ass to clean. It's a pain. It doesn't go with anything.
Yes.
But you're like, I got to put this in there. Like, you got to give the people what they want.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes. So like, for example, this was more so in my first book, especially I think when it's your first book, they don't give you too much creative license. You need to kind of prove yourself, and then you get more and more creative license after that. But I think the one thing that I'll tell you right now off the top of my head is Turkish Delight. I put that in the book because that book was all about all the basic classics, the ones that everybody knows about the Middle East. And well, Turkish Delight, can you have a classics without Turkish Delight? And if you know the recipe testing that went behind that, the sort of the disasters and the failures to reach something that actually really worked that you could publish, and the storyline, I mean, just how that whole recipe developed, it was pretty bonkers. But so that recipe is definitely a good example, and I've never made it since.
It's funny because
maybe I should. You know what? I should now.
Yeah, update us on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Because I always think about it. I remember I speak to my mom. My mom has a bunch of cookbooks, and she's a really, really great. She's like a wizard in the kitchen. And I remember every now and then as a kid, she'd be like, there would be some beautiful cookbook on the wall, right? Gorgeous photography, prose that is just poetic, beautiful. And I remember she'd be like, you can't cook one dish from that cookbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
Absolutely.
awful. They all taste terrible. Every single one of them tastes bad, but they're beautiful. They look
Yeah.
fantastic. And then
Yeah.
she'd point out some, say like every recipe in that cookbook is fantastic. Every single one is cookable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, a lot of cookbooks these days they're knocked out in like 6 months. So there's an economy for it. And when you're doing that, there's only so much you can do. First of all, the creative licenses, you're more or less, how many recipes can you really come out for a book? 100. Can you creatively come out that are yours or unique or legitimate? And then you're not copying or perhaps not necessarily retesting enough. So there is a bit of that element too, but you get that in every industry, right? So food has turned into a real kind of vogue industry, let's say.
How do I feel like you probably better than most navigate seem to be like seamlessly navigating the different media that you have to work, the channels that you have to work with, whether it's a blogspot website, or if it's a YouTube or Instagram. Like, you somehow seem to be navigating them well. What medium do you enjoy the most?
So I love writing. I'm a person that feels that I can really get my message across writing, and I do it quickly. So I like that, but I spend a lot of time, just writing stuff and throwing it, or just sitting on it, or no, it's not finished. And it's usually finished. I go back to it months later. I'm like, why the hell didn't I just put that out? But I do like video. I think it's fun. I think you can just kind of be yourself. I don't like the stage stuff. That's what I don't like. And for a while, cooking and all of that was really all about being very staged, and I can't be staged. So if you put me in a situation, you're like, okay, there's no rules, let's go for it. Then I'm like, okay, let's do it. But if you're like, oh, stand there, no, do it this way, don't move, don't, and then I'm just like, and then I get flustered and I can't deal with it, and I'm frustrated and I don't want to do it. Yeah. And so the direction now with video is a lot more sort of natural, homemade. It's not this sort of so I like it. I do want to get into it, but I am very technically challenged. So, and the last couple of years have also, obviously, for a lot of us, we've all been kind of in this very transient space. So I haven't really gotten down to doing everything. I've been doing a lot more soul searching, let's say. So, but maybe, I would love to do a little bit more of that, the fun stuff too. I did a bunch of these reels that sort of put some people off, and then just kind of had a lot of more other people just kind of going, please do more. But there's a time. Which ones were those? There's a time and place for what I was doing for my daima.
Oh yeah, those were hilarious.
Delivery concept in Dubai.
They were so good.
I thought so. I didn't realize people didn't realize I have a sarcastic streak. I was like, there was a few people that were just kind of like, taken aback, like, what? And I was just like, it's sarcasm. Like, I don't take myself seriously. Just because I'm a chef doesn't mean I have to be serious, or because I write about serious topics sometimes from a historical or political perspective, that I just have to be like a, school teacher. Yeah. So, I mean, no offense to school teachers, because they're all amazing. That was a really bad sort of, but yeah, yeah. But I did get this sort of like, just stick to cooking. I was like, gosh, okay.
Just please direct them to
the unfollow button.
Yeah, right, and also direct them to the name of your first blog.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious about the about Taste Lebanon. This as a project, and. This is this like bespoke tours, culinary tourism in Lebanon.
Yeah.
And I guess anyone who's been to Lebanon would understand why this concept would work, obviously. I'm curious, for somebody who did this professionally, what do you think the situation is going to be for this type of stuff in the years to come?
Yeah. So we've run a few Taste Lebanon tours recently. And to be honest, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's just, the whole landscape has changed. The people that have been involved have either left or are unable to operate. Just, you know, the whole situation is unfathomable. So where is it headed? I mean, I have conflicted feelings with running toward these sort of touristic these tours with the situation, because it's sort of kind of like, oh, come to the zoo, and you have to be very careful that it's not that. So to be honest with you, I ask myself this question all the time, and I don't know. I would like to see Taste Lebanon contribute and give back to the local economy, and sort of, but it also feels like there's a lot of house cleaning that needs to happen first, in terms of from a government standpoint, not from a people's standpoint. So I don't really have an answer. I don't know. I just kind of think we've got a good couple of decades, maybe, you know, of just, a lot of transformation that's going to happen. So it's hard to see or know where this is headed.
Yeah, because it's almost, I have this problem too. I live in Lebanon, and I'm always trying to encourage people to come and visit. I proudly run Fikra out of Lebanon. But there's this conflict, because any sort of maintenance feels like you're maintaining the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like
we're not allowing justice to happen.
Yeah.
We're not going after them.
Yeah.
We're just kind of pretending everything's okay. So, and that's it's a very, very touchy. It needs to be a very conscious point. But, you know, there is one thing I noticed is, and it should have happened, and the government should have been doing this, is this sort of like encouragement for local production.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, we're losing in some areas, but we're probably developing and seeing a sort of new, like a transformation in a new direction. So, which could be positive. It doesn't all have to be negative. You know, it's hard not to have so much like a negative sort of overwhelming negativity around the situation. I mean, so I think, you know, I think we will have a lot of really interesting homegrown brands really kind of grow in terms of like industrial production, wines. I mean, and we need to keep encouraging that as much as possible.
Last question before we get to the sort of the single ingredient and then the quick Q&A. I want to talk a little bit about the word jeweled.
Okay.
So jeweled kitchen, jeweled table. What is your interpretation of the word jeweled in this case? Is it fancy? Is it what is it prestigious, ornate? What's the sort of the meaning behind jeweled in this case?
No, it's for me jeweled, just sort of vivid, loud, in your face, you know, bold, bold and very visual, very, very sort of driven. And like I mentioned, you know, it was coined by by my
Yeah.
by my ex-publishers. But I think, you know, they they sort of, you know, when you're not used to sort of the cuisine and the culture, and it's vivacious, right? It's so in your face. So I think there was a bit of that element as well.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So for those of you who are new to the series, we ask every guest to choose either a single ingredient, a recipe, dish, or cooking technique that they'd like to highlight, either because it's something that they have an undying obsession towards, or it's something that is on their mind right now. And Bethany, for her ingredient, chose kishik. Tell the viewers, what is kishik?
Okay. Kishik for me is just it's absolutely amazing ingredient, and it's so underrated and it's so underexplored. So if we're going to look at it from like a technicality, kishik as we know it in the Levant, because there's many variations of it, right? You've got kashk, which is the Iranian version. You've got tarhana, which is a sort of sour pasta that's, you know, similar, very, very similar to kishik. But this sort of idea was mix grains with yogurt, ferment them, sun dry them, and then, you know, grind them down to a fine powder so that you can have soup for your hangover. I mean, literally, this is hangover food. You know, one of the earliest documented recipes was like, oh, if you've had a little tipple the night before, get some, you know, kishik and bring it to, you know, go through the whole process. And it, you know, it's got balancing properties. It'll take care of your head.
Oh, I'm so glad that my techniques are rooted in research.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, you know how many times I've had kishik and a hangover? I'm like, kishik, that's what I need right now. And living in the mountains, when we were snowed in Baskinta, guess what my dad would get? He'd get the kishik out and he'd get the awarma out, and that's what we were having. So my absolute obsession with it as an ingredient, that comfort, that familiarity, that sort of like, oh my God, I need a bowl of kishik because I'm freezing cold right now. You know, is rooted in that. And I think it is one of the most fascinating ingredients. It's a formidable example of ancient technology. I like to say technology because when you really look at it and you understand it as an ingredient, you think, wow, this is just, how did we even think about this? How did we get to the sort of this thought process of developing this and this technique of bringing this ingredient and knowing that we're going to put it away and we're going to pull it out in the middle of winter. We're going to use it. And then I say so for me, it's underused because we know those pictures right there, right? Kishik on flatbread mixed with a hot sauce, shatta or whatever. And then you have the kishik soup, right? And then maybe some people might be familiar with it in its green form, kishik akhdar, which means it's raw. It's still in ferment. It's not been sun-dried, right? But we can use it. Once you understand what it is, you can use it. It's essentially a yogurt flour, right? So once you know that, you can use it in so many various ways. So for me, I love to make it into a bechamel. I use it instead of using flour. So I use it as a base. It's called a quiche camel. I use it to make souffles. I use it to make gravies for vegetables, for meats. So it is definitely a very exciting, and again, I've got business ideas that I've just never rolled out, which I should get to it. But I think people are still a little sort of like, there's this sort of kishik, yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, please no. Oh. So there's still a little bit of people, you know, in the UK and in the US I just recently actually cooked it. I just did a pop-up in Washington DC for my dad, and I used it to make a clam chowder. And I thought, this is not going to go down too well. It's just going to be one of those experimental things that people are just going to be like, yeah, not too. They loved it. A lot of people told me that the clam chowder was their favorite. So I was kind of yeah, kind of had a little bit more hope for it, for its future again.
So, you know, like, I feel like in Lebanon, at least, there are the four standard mini pizzas that you get at
Yes.
every childhood birthday party or like picnic, right? There's za'atar, there's jibne, there is kishik, and then there's the national food of Lebanon, which I feel like is underreported, which is the mini pizza with the single olive.
Olive on top, exactly. Yeah.
And the kishik is definitely the least appreciated of the quartet.
It is. And they're delicious. They are.
Yeah,
They're so, I mean, I think it's an association. I don't know if it's so much a sort of, it doesn't need to be an acquired taste or an acquired flavor. It isn't that weird of an ingredient, but I think it is an association of maybe, I don't know, sad to say, potentially peasantry and that's why it's shunned and looked down upon. But actually, it's one of the best ingredients.
Well, it's like za'atar.
Yeah.
If you think about menouche za'atar, it's you're eating a spice essentially. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do our rapid fire questions, and then we'll open up to see if there are questions from the audience. What are you reading or watching right now?
Nothing.
Good for you.
So currently, well, I mean, I picked up a book to reread, which I kind of keep delving into in and out over the last couple of months, because I've been with my godchildren, which if you met them will know that you have zero time. Like, it's too chaotic. I mean, with kids anyway, right? So I haven't had a lot of time. I've been on the road, but I've been reading A Line in the Sand.
Sure. So A Line in the Sand, James Barr. He's gonna be on a book club, African book club in a few months. We just announced.
I can't wait.
Yeah. So finish it beforehand, and then we'll have a conversation.
Yes. So it's a reread, but it's like I had skimmed it, and I'm trying to like really get in there and do a proper study of it now. But yeah, cool. Being on the road and having my amazing godchildren around is not helping. But we'll see. Nothing, not watching, not managing to watch much either as well. So yeah.
Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
So I'd like to shadow a lot of people for different perspectives. So I've recently really gotten into, I mean, I love art, but I've recently started doing this sort of like getting the paint board out and just doing, random stuff. But I do enjoy it. I think it's very cathartic. And there is one Iraqi artist whose work I love, and I find myself always going back to it when I'm looking at when I'm actually working on my work documents, in terms of like, I want some really cool sort of artistic inspiration, and that's Have, I think I'm saying her, Have Kahraman. So there's a lot of messaging that comes out with her work as well. So, and I love the aesthetics of it, and it's both kind of modern, but has the Arabic, it's kind of a West Asian feel to it.
Cool.
So I do like that. And I think, not from a political standpoint, but having lived in Dubai and coming from a country like Lebanon, Sheikh Mohammed would be a very interesting person for me. I would really like to shadow him because, so for me, that would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I'm reading the book, actually, Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, Jesus, just to be in that timeline and be in those conversations and see, but I don't have the same sort of, adrenaline for
I feel like Lawrence of Arabia would be a killjoy a little bit. He doesn't seem like he'd be a fun person to hang out with.
Yeah, I might, but still, I think that just kind of being within that, just
with Faisal and
when you're just reading and you're just going, wow, how did this, how did these people think, or how was this even acceptable? So the last two questions, I actually have them wrong on the screen, so I'll just tell you what they are. The next question is, what is your go-to guilty pleasure midnight food selection? Oh God. Tail fat, a warma. I mean, I don't really care so much for chocolate, but I mean, I do like it. But I absolutely adore butter and fats and things like fish head.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm a little wild eater. Kishik. I mean, hello.
Tail fat and fish head. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The last question is, what food?
Cheese. Lots of cheese.
All right. The last question is, what food immediately makes you think of home?
مجدرة. مطبقة.
Mjadra, how do you have mjadra? There's a few different ways.
Not مسفية. Not مسفية. So it's not the mdardra, which I know in certain parts is not. Yeah. It's also called the mjadra. So for me, the mjadra I grew up eating, there's rice is just added to give it the creaminess.
Yeah.
My aunt used to make it مسفية, but at home we didn't. My dad or.
Do you have it with salata?
Yes. Okay. Cabbage salad, cider vinegar.
Of course. Good job.
Some people like it with lemon, but there's a funny story of me absolutely hating this dish. And obviously my dad always saying, you have to finish this, you have to finish your food. You can't get off the table. And I sat there for literally probably what was hours. And this, and then just decided that the only way I was going to get out of eating this bowl of mjadra was to just dunk my head into it. And it worked. I was successful, but I never thought I would become. And my aunt's making it today, and I didn't. She's like, "You're not gonna have mjadra." I was like, "No, I've got to go through this call." She's like, "Oh, okay." Like I'm looking forward to that now. So it's my highlight.
Speaking of sort of like peasants' food, right? Mjadra is a perfect example.
Yes. The best food is peasant food. I mean, this might come through in a lot of my food and my cooking. It's very earthy, right? Yeah. So a lot of the ingredients that I love to eat and I love to cook with and I love to challenge in terms of how I'm gonna apply it in a sort of modern way are very earthy ingredients, really. Very villagey ingredients.
Exactly. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah.
The
village comes out.
Yeah, because when I was looking through, I mean, like this, for example, the two images that I just showed on the screen, this is such a daya breakfast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad is, my dad, for everything that he's done and in the circles he's associated, he's very daya. You cannot take him. I mean, he loves the village. He lives in the village. He's still farming. He still farms the land. He's, got an idea every day on doing something that has to do with the land and farming or creating produce or things. So, he's that there's the influence and inspiration. Like I see that and I see my dad breakfast.
Yeah. Some people see a heart attack.
That's not his everyday breakfast, but yeah, that's definitely by association.
Well, you can be found on all these different social media platforms. Bethany, it is really such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
I loved having you on. And hopefully at some point we can have you back. This is going to be a long evolving series. And so thanks for sharing all of your perspective with us.
Thank you. I love what you guys do. It's amazing. So we need more of this. So great.
It's true. Okay, everybody, enjoy your day or night wherever you are. This will go up on YouTube and on our podcast in a couple of days. Make sure you share it with your friends who missed today's evening. The only way we can have a diverse narrative about the region is if we have a diverse community. So let people in and we will grow that way. Okay, everybody, take care.
Thank you.